This is my story. I wonder if you have ever known other Christians that have come across the pathway of your life and wondered, well, how did they make a beginning? Well, this is my story. I was favoured in the providence of God to be born into a Christian home. My father and mother were humble Christians, and I know that from the first day of my life until my father went to heaven on the 12th of September 1936, my name was mentioned in his prayers every day. But being born into a Christian home did not mean that automatically I was a Christian. Because having left school not quite 15 at the time of the Great Depression, when, like today, there were about 3 million unemployed, work was very hard to find, and my father, having worked all his life in industry, didn't want me in engineering, and so he decided I should go in for a commercial career. But that wasn't my idea, and I never was very bright, and so I didn't make much headway in my lessons for commercial education, shorthand, typing, etc., etc. And so he said to me in the October of 1933, if you don't find work next week, you'll come with me. I said, all right. So on the 3rd of October 1933, 7 o'clock in the morning, I went off to work with him, with my breakfast and my dinner packed up for me, and I started work with him. He, by this time, had been promoted to be foreman of his department, and I was taught my first job was to operate a machine to make steel cut nails. This was his craft. He used to make and set up the tools in these machines to produce the work. And of course, to every machine there was what was called a feeder, and that was my first job. And it's interesting to know that he would start work about 1893, and I started in 1933, but I started at the same rate as he did. That's the sort of firm they were. There was no increase in wages from that day to that. The rate for starting was £1 a day for learning, and that was what I got. And then, in 1934, I started to learn that trade under him. But being anything but a good lad, I knew that if I got into a hole, I didn't always listen to Father's instructions as to what to do. If I got into a hole, he would shout at me. He might even lift his hand to me, but he would get me out of the hole and get the machines working. And all this time, from the time I was 7-year-old, I knew that I was a sinner, and I knew that I needed a Saviour. And often I had sought, but I never seemed to get anywhere. And so it was in September 1936 that my eldest sister got married on the 5th of September. We saw her into her home on the Saturday night after they came back from the honeymoon on the 12th. And I left my parents to walk home to the other side of the town, and they came home on the tram. Well, we lived on a hill, and of course in those days the shop stayed open till 9 o'clock on the Saturday night. Mother got off at the bottom of the hill and she said, I just want a few things from this shop. Father went on a bit. Well, he had given me that day my eldest sister's door key, because we lived in a terrace. There was no back entrances, and you could only get into the house if somebody was in there or if you had a key. And so as I got home, I saw down the passage that there was a light. I knew the light wasn't in the living room, but it was through in the kitchen. I put my key in the door and went in. As I got round the door, I looked into the kitchen, and I could see he was on the floor. He was gone. That was a momentous event in my life, because it took away all the props and all the castles in the air that I had hoped for, and that he talked about as to what we'd do in the coming years. Have a car, have a new house. It was all gone. And what was I going to do at work? Because he had been a master craftsman, and he had produced a line of work which nobody else there had ever made. And there was nobody else there to set the machines up. And I was only half trained. Now, he had often told me, urged me, Fred, make your father's and your grandfather's God your God. But I never seemed to get there. He also told me of some of his experiences. How when he had been at a loss to know what to do, to get things going, how he'd gone around behind the furnace and cried to God for help, and how God had helped him and guided him as to what to do. And after he had died and I went back to work, they had a great glut of orders for this work. And we were working from 7 in the morning till 9 at night to try and boost the production. Of course, we worked piecework. Everything was all right when the machines were going all right. But when my machines were broken down, if one was broken down, there was nothing coming into my pocket from that machine. And if there were 3 broken down, there was nothing coming in at all until I got some going. And also, I not only had that responsibility, but I had married men as the feeders of these machines who were relying upon me to earn their living. So it was a bit of a responsibility for a young teenager. But I went back to work, and things went all right quite a while I was working on Father's foundation and his tools. But there came a time when the foreman brought me a sample of my work, and he said, this is no good, you'll have to do something about this. They're no good like that. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do to put it right. And I remembered what my father had said. So I turned to my father's God. Help me. I went back and stood in front of that machine, and there came into my mind to take out a certain tool, grind it in another direction, put it back in, and the work was all right. And I take that as my first spiritual experience. God met me at the point of my need. Some years later, well, perhaps the next year, a rumour went round that we were to go on short time. This had always been a feature of my father's working life until he was promoted to foreman. 3 days a week. He used to work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Monday on the road. And that went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. Sometimes a full week for Christmas, and then perhaps a fortnight out afterwards. This was the pattern. So I knew all about this because I'd been reared on it. But the prospect of it, with having a mother and home to keep going, rather frightened me. And I remember thinking about it as I worked, and these words came to me. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. And it was wonderful. Of course, I had a lot to learn. I had a lot to learn.